On the morning of December 7th, 1996, Robert Ramirez was shot in the back with a .38 caliber slug, fired by Officer Waldman. The bullet entered the right shoulder of Mr. Ramirez and traveled downward and diagonally where it came to rest in the membrane that surrounds Mr. Ramirez's heart. This case is about the use of excessive force and a twisting of the facts in an attempt to cover up what really happened that early morning on December 7th, 1996. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, my name is Greg Showerman, and I represent Robert Ramirez in this civil action against Officer Waldman and the City of Chicago. As we go through the process, from time to time, there may be a question of law that arises. As members of the jury, you do not need to concern yourself with questions of law. They will be addressed and answered by the judge. However, as we proceed, there will undoubtedly be conflicts and questions of fact that arise in this case. And as members of the jury, you will be asked to sift through these facts and determine what really happened in the early hours of that morning where the incident took place. About 4 o'clock in the morning on December 7th, two vehicles were traveling down Evergreen Avenue and came to a stop somewhere between Rockwell and California Avenues. The deposition of Officer Levy says that Mr. Ramirez exited his car screaming or yelling something in Spanish and headed toward the rear of his car. The testimony of Officer Waldman states that Officer Levy got out of the patrol car first and went to address the concerns or whatever was happening with Mr. Ramirez. As Mr. Waldman was exiting the car, his testimony is that he looked over the top of the car and observed Mr. Ramirez with a folding or a jackknife in his right hand stab Officer Levy. As Officer Waldman was going to the aid of his partner, he observed that Officer Levy had both hands around the right forearm of Mr. Ramirez, the right forearm of the hand which still contained the knife. Officer Waldman's testimony is that Officer Levy's grip was broken or that he let loose of the forearm of Officer Ramirez, and as the knife was coming up again to strike or stab Officer Levy, he fired a single shot. The defense counsel will also probably point to the fact that Mr. Ramirez had a troubled high school career, so to speak, and never really graduated. They'll also undoubtedly point out that Mr. Ramirez has a past criminal record and that on the evening prior to the morning when the incident took place, Mr. Ramirez was drinking beer and hard liquor. Lastly, you'll probably hear that Mr. Ramirez does not have any corroborating witnesses to confirm his story. But what I'd like you to know about Mr. Ramirez is that after a somewhat troubled high school time, Mr. Ramirez did get married, and he and his wife settled down and began a family. And over the past 8 years, the Ramirezes have led a rather uneventful life as far as any contact with law enforcement. Mr. Ramirez also obtained a good job as a carpenter and has become a contributing member of society in the city of Chicago. He does work with which his boss is extremely well pleased. A few other things you should know about Mr. Ramirez as you consider the facts which will be presented. Mr. Ramirez is left-handed, not right-handed, and has never been right-handed. Mr. Ramirez does not speak Spanish and never has spoken Spanish. The other thing, the officer's testimony reported that the knife was definitely some type of folding or jackknife. Mr. Ramirez does not own a folding knife or a jackknife. Mr. Ramirez does not use a folding knife or a jackknife in his line of work as a carpenter, nor does Mr. Ramirez keep a folding or a jackknife in his fishing box, which he enjoys fishing in his leisure time. I'd like to discuss the police incident report for a minute with you before proceeding. The incident report reported that the knife found at the scene contained no discernible fingerprints. The knife was also found on the ground in the closed position. In other words, the blade was not extended. Lastly, the incident report contradicts the officer's testimony as to the arrangement in which the two cars were parked on Evergreen Avenue. Officer Waldman was a below-average high school student who reportedly had a reputation for bullying. Additionally, when Officer Waldman graduated from the police academy, he was a below-average cadet. And working in 3 separate jurisdictions, Officer Waldman had to be reprimanded for the use of excessive force. Again, this trial is about the use of excessive force and a twisting of the facts to try and cover up what really happened at 4 o'clock in the morning on December 7th, 1996. Thank you.